Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each of the episodes against each other. And today's episode is One Piece East Blue Saga Logtown Arc, Episode 50, Usopp versus Daddy the Father Showdown at High Noon. Episode in a nutshell is a brief summary of the episode. So this episode begins with Luffy still lost, and then running into Zoro, who shows off his new sword. And then we catch up with Usopp, who is still shopping and getting scammed by shop owners, and he happens to be looking at a pair of goggles, but realizes he left his wallet in his bag outside. The bag is outside because it wouldn't fit in through the door, because it is so full of stuff. And so he then goes to get his wallet, but that is when Carol comes in and decides she wants to purchase the goggles that are sitting on the counter at the cash register. And because she does have the money to pay, the cashier shop owner does sell them to her instead, which of course makes Usopp angry. So he then chases after her, saying, like, you've swiped my goggles. I was going to buy those. I'll pay for them, but can you give them to me? She instead gives them to her father, who is a bounty hunter who was a former Marine, um, known as Daddy the Father. And so Daddy the Father, of course, dotes on his daughter, takes the goggles, and then Usopp basically lies and says he's the one with the $30 million bounty, not realizing that Daddy is a bounty hunter. And then he ends up challenged to a duel. They end up with a crowd of onlookers in front of a graveyard where they're going to have like the old Western style duel, where they each got a pistol, turn back to back, walk 10 paces, turn and shoot. And of course, Nami arrives and is like, what kind of idiot would actually challenge Daddy Masterson, Daddy the Father, to a duel? And then she gets up to the front of the crowd and is like, a type of idiot. Because, of course, Usopp was the one. Usopp being a coward, when he turns around and they walk the paces, he immediately starts running, and Daddy ends up shooting the pistol out of his hand, which terrifies Usopp. Then, after conversing with Daddy after he hears Nami call his name, Daddy the Father tells how he became a bounty hunter, and it actually was Usopp's dad, Yasopp, that was the one who led to him being a bounty hunter. They had a confrontation. Daddy lost the duel, but Yasopp found a locket with Carol's picture in it and told the story of how he's a deadbeat, abandoned his child in order to be a pirate because he didn't think he was great at being a parent, but that the world only needs one absolute. I'm not going to say anything really, really mean, but the point is the world only needed one like Yasopp, and so he then decides to leave Daddy alive and tells him to, be there for his daughter before leaving. And this is when Daddy the Father made the decision to no longer be a Marine, but to make his living by bounty hunting small bounties so that he can live in the same town as his daughter and stay there with his daughter. And it's less life-threatening because, of course, these are the smaller bounties that come into town, enough to make a good living, but not ultimately going to threaten his life against the big names. And so this, of course, inspires Usopp to want to be like his dad even more as far as being a sharpshooter is concerned, I hope. He's not planning to be a deadbeat like him, too. But I believe when he says he wants to be like his dad, he means being a pirate and his skills. And while I give Yasopp trouble for being a pirate, and I don't give Usopp the same, Usopp isn't married with a child. So, two different scenarios here. But anyways, Daddy then challenges Usopp to hit a weather vane that's very far away with his weapon of choice. If he hits the weather vane, then he will let Usopp go. If he doesn't, then he'll shoot Usopp. So Usopp manages to hit the weather vane, and Daddy the Father is impressed by this, and so gives him the goggles before then leaving with his daughter. And that's the episode. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, it's now time to rank the episode. As always, we'll be ranking on our mostly objective ranking, followed by the personal ranking. So our mostly objective rank values, we'll start with the negative. There was no main plot significance whatsoever. This is a filler episode. Its entire purpose is to be fun, um, or to give a little insight into what the character is doing in town, like, but it doesn't really have much to do with anything. So -4 points right off the bat. Then canceling that out, we have a +4 points for our multi-arc main character growth. And this one I think was just me being generous and giving free points. Um, Basically, Usopp and his goggles, those goggles travel with him throughout the entire series. As far as I'm aware, he has them all the way. Like, I haven't seen from Wano onwards, but I'm pretty sure he has them like all the way up at least to Wano arc and potentially even beyond that. They become kind of an iconic part of his character. And so the goggles, in that sense, because they do carry on with the character throughout the entire series, I think um, does make them important. Whether that's for points worth of important, like I said, I think I'm being generous here. And that, anyways, cancels out that filler um, arc deficit, which then brings us up to 0. And now we have the single arc supporting character introductions. And this is Daddy Masterson and Carol, his daughter, 1 point each, which does bring this episode to a 2 out of 10. To honorably mention it, just in case anyone does wonder, while Yasopp is part of Daddy Masterson's backstory, and we do see a backstory of Daddy Masterson, I don't consider it to be separate from the introduction because any development or powers or growth or anything that happens in the introduction episode are just considered to be part of the character's introduction, and therefore it doesn't get any additional points being in that backstory, and it doesn't really develop Yasopp as a character so much, other than giving more evidence that he is a bit of a deadbeat. Um, and who abandoned his child and his spouse, who then later died, leaving his child an orphan on the island to have to fend for himself at a very young age because he couldn't be bothered to fulfill his commitments that he made when he got married and had a child. Either way, the point being, I didn't count it for points because it's Daddy's backstory, and that counts as part of his introduction, though I do want to acknowledge I could have, if it had happened in a separate episode, given points for development there. So, either way, 2 out of 10 for this episode. Bringing us now to the arc ranking so far for the mostly objective ranking. And we have the episode 1, the town of the beginning and the end, arrival at Logtown. Second, Sandai Kotetsu and Yubashiri, Zoro's new swords, and the female sergeant major. And then this episode is in third place, Usopp versus Daddy the Father, showdown at high noon. Now my personal ranking. Probably could guess at it, to be honest. I'm not fond of Yasopp at all. Like, I just think we should never be glorifying the abandonment of our children. That is a terrible thing to glorify. Usopp, like I said, I don't consider him in the same vein as his father because he does not have a spouse, he does not have a child. So him going on an adventure is a completely different scenario to abandoning a family that you've committed to and created to run off and be a pirate. So I don't consider them in the same vein. However, Usopp's admiration of his father, who abandoned him, is very questionable. And like I said, I feel like that almost in a sense glorifies it or tries to make it okay that this happened because it doesn't bother Usopp, so why should it bother you? I just don't like that. I don't personally like that at all. Mm-mm. And that is why when Usopp, admires his father. I like to rewrite it in my own head to he likes his father's skill as a sharpshooter, and when he wants to be like his dad, he wants to be a sharpshooter like his dad. I pretend he doesn't actually want to be a deadbeat that abandons his family and commitments, etc. But I don't like Yasop. And Daddy the father is a nice character, but like he's one episode, he's a filler character. Same with Carol. Carol's adorable. She looks like she stepped out of a completely different time period because she is dressed very fluffy dress. Like she looks like Victorian almost. Okay, I'm not big on history, so I don't know what era the dress is actually from, but in my uneducated brain, it would go Victorian type thing, like Victorian era with like the corseted top, the poof, the like bell sleeves. Point being, she does not dress in the same way that pretty much everybody else on the streets in Logtown are dressed. She looks like she stepped out of a different time period, but it's adorable and I love pretty dresses, so as a child I would totally have done that too and worn a frou-frou dress, even if the occasion did not necessarily demand it. Um, so there is that. But ultimately, again, those two characters, they didn't really matter to the plot, like to the overarching plot. They were just there for this episode specifically. There was no plot progression at all. Usopp, he does grow on me. So I do like Usopp as a character, but he doesn't grow on me until later in the series. At this point, he's still not necessarily my favorite of characters, so an entire episode dedicated to him, not my cup of tea. At this point, he's more in his annoying stage, like where his cowardice is more on the annoying side rather than the comedic side. So ultimately, I didn't like the episode. I gave it a 1 out of 10. I was just like, I didn't even really want to watch. I was thinking of skipping it and just making the presentation based on my memory, but then I felt that that would be unfair because maybe I forgot something that actually was good, but no, it sucked. So 1 out of 10. And that brings our list to in first, Sendai Katetsu and Yubashiri, Zoro's New Swords, and the Female Sergeant Major, followed by The Town of the Beginning and the End, Arrival at Logtown, followed by this episode in third and last place, Usopp versus Daddy the Father, Showdown at High Noon. Bringing us to the saga ranking so far, where we're ranking each of the arcs within this saga. And on our mostly objective ranking, we have in first, Romance Dawn arc, followed by Arlong Park arc, Orangetown arc, Baretti arc, Syrup Village arc, Buggy Side Story arc currently in sixth, and then Logtown arc has a score of 21 out of 60 so far for points. Then on the personal side, our Buggy Side Story arc is obviously in first place. Then Arlong Park arc, Orangetown arc, Romance Dawn arc, Baretti arc, Syrup Village arc is currently in sixth place for me, and then the Logtown arc so far has a score of 15 out of a possible 60. Which brings us now to the final segment of our series ranking so far, where we will be ranking each of the sagas against each other. And so far, with the arcs we've completed, the mostly objective ranking has a score of 34 out of a possible 80, and then the personal ranking side, East Blue Saga, has a score of 30 out of a possible 80. But with that, we've now rewatched and ranked One Piece East Blue Saga, Logtown Arc, Episode 50, Usopp versus Daddy the Father, Showdown at High Noon. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.